Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sir. Today, I'm bringing you a just getting started tutorial for the game Foxhole. Hopefully, this will help you get in game much faster than you normally would have and maybe answer some of your questions. So let's get down to it. When you first start playing, you'll be met with a faction selection screen. It's important to note that both factions are actually pretty much the same as far as items and weapons and so on. There are some minor cosmetic differences, especially when it comes to vehicles, but past that, they're mostly the same. It is, however, important to note that once you select a faction and you've been in the game for more than a couple minutes, you will be faction locked to that faction. So I encourage you to work with any friends that you may have playing to pick the correct faction in the first place. This faction lock does last only for this war, however. So after this war is complete, you are free to choose again. Once you've spawned into the game, you'll be starting out on your faction's home region. To be blunt, this is more of a tutorial island, so to speak, with a few different things that you can play with. However, the first and most important thing that we're going to look at is going to be the travel tent. This specific tent next to your town hall is going to be where you can travel to other regions, and ultimately will be how you get into the war. Simply walk up to it, press E to open it, and you'll be met with a map. This map will show you the status of the war, in addition to all the skirmish maps. Simply hovering over each region will show you the status. It's important to note that you can only spawn into regions that are controlled or partially controlled by your faction. In this case, I'm spawning into Westgate, which is currently a colonial port base. One of the first things I like to do when I get in game is typically just hit M to bring up your map. Here you can see all the various things that's going on within the region that you're in, such as combat, shared map markers, and the location of everything in the region. This is a dynamic map which is constantly updating to include things like enemy movement and structure placement. Furthermore, you can hit N to bring up the region map once again. This will give you a good look at what's going on in the rest of the world while you are in game. Here you can also select a different region to look at that map. That way you can get a good idea of what's going on in each and every single region without actually having to go over there. For example, I can choose the Endless Shore map, and here we can see that Enduring Post is being held by the Colonials, and Brackish Point is being held by the Wardens. However, we can see the rest of the map objectives are also neutral. It's also important to note that on the map you can see all the various structures and world icons. Each of these world icons represents a building that can either be used or captured for your faction. For instance, if you want to refine things, you go to the refinery. If you want to use a workshop, you have that on the map, and so on. You can also find the various resources on the map as well. Throughout the world, you're going to find various FOBs, outposts, town halls, and port bases that your faction can use to spawn at. It is important to set your spawn whenever you can, just to know that when you die, you will respawn there. However, each and every time you spawn, you do use something called a spawn supply, or S supply. So it's important to keep these port bases and FOBs and so on completely stocked as much as possible with these spawn supplies. You can think of them kind of like a spawn ticket. Once you run out of these, you will be forced to spawn at a different location. You can also see here you'll find a stockpile of items that your faction has created. Everything from guns to resources and explosives and more. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. In the game Foxhole, you're going to find 5 key resource items. The first one is going to be scrap, which is used to be refined into basic materials. These basic materials are used largely throughout the world to create every single item, or at least most of them. Another one of these key resources is sulfur, which can be refined into explosive materials. These are pretty essential and slightly more rare than the other resources. Just like anything else in the game, you also have to gather your own fuel. Fuel can be gathered at the barrels throughout the map. And finally, we have components, which are gathered at these tank husks located on the map. These get refined into something called refined materials, which are the more advanced materials in the game. These will be used to make more advanced structures and more advanced vehicles. Like I said before, everything in the game is created by a player. Everything from the resources all the way to the various structures. So it's important to keep these resources flowing smoothly. Gathering resources is quite simple. Simply have your hammer equipped and go up to the resource and simply hold left click. You'll begin gathering the resource until that resource node is depleted. In the case of scrap, you can simply move on to the next one until the next one resets. One of the final things that you'll be getting as a resource, as a byproduct of scrapping, is going to be the tech part. Tech parts are used to advance your faction along the tech tree. So it's important to save these tech parts and get them back to your technology center as much as possible. Once you have the raw resource, you can simply go to a refinery and click on the resource that you're trying to refine. Here you will see that a timer will start and you'll start to receive the resource back in its refined state. In this case, I'm putting in scrap and I'm going to receive basic materials. Please note that it takes a different amount of time to refine each resource. Simply click on your resource to pick them back up and you'll be good to go. Now that we have our resource, we can actually go to a weapons factory to start placing an order. For instance, if I want to make some rifles and some rifle ammo, I simply click on these items and then click yes. These items will take resources from my inventory to create. In this case, I'll be using basic materials to create these. It's also important to note that you're not just creating one gun or one ammunition. You're actually creating a crate of these. So for instance, I may be creating 20 rifles or 80 clips of ammo or so on. Once again, you'll see that this will take a little bit of time for it to finish. The more items that you create at a time, the longer the timer will be, and all items have a different amount of time required to create. As I said before, every single item in the game is researched and created by your faction. This includes progressing along a tech tree to unlock more items using tech parts. These items are unlocked at the technology center in your port bases. And as you can see, you will advance from simply having rifles all the way down to heavy machine guns, tanks, and more. We can also see here that some items require blueprints in order to construct. For instance, if you want to produce grenade launcher blueprints, we'll be using scrap, not basic materials, in order to produce these. You can simply click on the item that you want to produce the blueprints for, and then hit print. Note that there is a timer involved in this as well. But once your blueprints are complete, you can simply come back and pick them back up. You can also mix and match the different blueprints. So let's say you want to make one set of grenade launchers and 2 sets of field machine guns, you can do that here as well. In order to make use of these grenade launcher blueprints, I'm going to need to take them to a workshop, which is another production building. You can see here initially I can't make any grenade launchers because I don't have any blueprints available. Simply click Submit Blueprints, and the blueprints from your inventory will be submitted to that structure. Now we can produce the grenade launchers in the same manner that we were producing the other items. Doing so will consume the blueprint, so it's always a good idea to have more blueprints going. While we're here, my rifles and my ammo should be ready, so I'm going to go ahead and pick those up. Note that you'll be given crates. These crates will need to be submitted to a stockpile found in the various FOBs and port bases and so on in order to get the actual item out. Simply grab your crates, put them into the inventory of the structure, and then hit Submit to Stockpile. This will submit the rifles and the rifle ammo to that stockpile so you can pull out individual items. To pull an item, simply left-click on that item and you'll begin to assemble it. For instance, if a player has stockpiled fuel, I can pull some of that out to put into my vehicle. It's important to keep your stockpile stocked with weapons, ammunition, and so on, so your soldiers can continue fighting. Like I said before, every single round used in the game has been created by a player. Now that I have access to a weapon, I can pull one out and equip it to my inventory, and then press R to reload it. As you can see here, I've loaded up one of the 2 clips I pulled out, and now I have 12 out of 12 rounds to fire. Constructing vehicles and structures are very similar to scrapping. Simply use your hammer on the blueprint of the vehicle or structure you are creating. This will pull the required materials straight from your inventory. Once you have hammered in all the resources, your vehicle will be complete. It's important to have some fuel ready when creating a vehicle so that you can immediately put that fuel into the vehicle and drive it out of the vehicle factory. That way the next person waiting to use it can begin to do so. And like I said before, every single vehicle is created by a player by using the vehicle factory. Every single vehicle is being created by a player at a vehicle factory. Anything from tanks to simply trucks, which are being used for logistics. Vehicles will play a key part in the war, so it's important to keep them constructed. Now let's talk about some of the basics of combat. Foxhole uses right-click to aim and left-click to fire mechanics. In addition, going crouch or going prone will increase your accuracy when firing. This can give you a significant edge, especially when fighting against a player that is not crouched or prone. You can also utilize cover in order to block your enemy. You can simply get around some of that cover, however, by using things like grenades. And of course, there are vehicles that you get to use and overcome as well. Let's go ahead and do some combat. So one of the various things that you're going to note is on the top of my screen, I have my stamina. This is being affected by every time I hold shift to sprint. You can also see that I'm trying to use as much cover as possible while staying out of enemy fire. However, in this case, I'm having to retreat. When taking damage, you'll see that there's a visual indicator on your uniform itself. It'll become a little bloodied, and you'll see blood spurts as you get hit. Once you've taken enough damage, however, you will go down. One of the most important concepts in Foxhole is that it's a massive world, and this means that you're not restricted to just one region. You can travel to a region by simply going to the edge of that map and traveling over to the next region. A timer will start to tick down, and then you'll be sent to that next region. This way you can get troops and supplies across the different regions to support the war. This concludes today's tutorial. Hopefully, this gives you a better idea of the various mechanics within the game and helps you get a running start with fewer questions. However, if you need assistance, I recommend joining us on the Foxhole official Discord, discord.gg/foxhole. Here, you will find knowledgeable community members, news and development updates straight from the developers themselves, and even find other players and clans to play with. It's important to note that this tutorial isn't nearly comprehensive, and because the game is constantly in development, everything in this tutorial is subject to change. Once again, my name is Sir, and I will see you next time.